Well, hello, Melinda. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you?
Very well. Dean Boles here, Swim Ontario, and again, we're in I think it's number 8 of our series that we've been able to bring to the Swim Ontario community, to the coaches, to the athletes, to officials, to administrators, or whoever else tunes in. Um, Lots of great stuff has come from you, Melinda, over these
Thank you.
last 8 weeks. Really, really impressive, and I feel really good, and just so that people understand is that we're quite fortunate to have you along because you're in demand. You are on radio stations. I just saw over the weekend, or I watched where you were on Conversation with Ron McLean. That's
Mhm.
pretty exciting from a Canadian standpoint. In my book, when you get a conversation with Ron McLean, that means you're moving up that sport ladder. So
Yeah,
congratulations on that. But I know that you had some really good, valuable input and insight to that conversation.
Yeah, I felt really grateful to have that opportunity and connect with Ron and Grant and discuss the topic of athletes after sport.
Yeah, yeah, so important, and I think everything you've been able to portray in your book, Personal Next, is also tools and reflection points for all of us. So I'm hoping that everybody's going to take full advantage of that. What else do you have going on? You have your website. You have some coaching tips, and you have
Yeah,
other things
so
going
I
on.
mean, we're still in the publicity stage of the book. So, on my to-do list this week, I have 3 or 4 more articles that I have to produce. But talking about the coaching tips, so every week I put out on my website, and it's an email subscription. You can sign up, a coaching tip for the week. And it's interesting. Last week, I had the idea and I actually wrote it, but it sat with me all weekend, and it wasn't the right time for this particular coaching tip. So I contemplated it, incubated, and finally it came to me yesterday morning, and it was to talk about joy and what is joy in our life despite all the circumstances. How can you look for joy?
Mhm,
So I'm
mhm.
quite excited. Tomorrow they release Thursday morning, early in the morning.
Okay.
Quite excited about this particular coaching tip. So that's something that I spent my week on.
Well, fantastic. And you spent a bit of time for our topic today, and that's experiencing today with care. And I think this being Mental Health Week, and I think with all the other things that, either we're dealing with internally or just the whole idea that we're listening to the news and there's this excitement about some sort of restart or reopen or return. But we know with the excitement, sometimes there's lots of other things that come along with it. So I think this is going to be quite appropriate.
Yeah, when we had our pre-conversation, about what would be a good topic for the week, it was the same thing as the joy topic. I really wanted to get into, the being of the person. And I didn't even think of it being Mental Health Week until I saw it yesterday. But I think it's so important that we care for ourselves.
Hmm.
And yet, at the same time, we have these big, hairy goals. And so we need to recognize that caring for ourselves doesn't mean that we give up on what we want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well,
So
let's
why don't
let's
we
get
jump
into this.
into
Jump
the
right
deck
into
that
it.
I
Yeah.
prepared? So, how can you take care of yourself? What do I need? So, that's a great question to ask yourself every day. What
Hmm.
actually do I need to be at my best? And as we continue in the COVID-19 environment, I was thinking exploring these 4 topics would be a really great way to think about what we need. So the first
Yeah.
one is calm, the second one is attentive, the third one is resilience, and the fourth one is engaged. But I'm also very aware that as a coach, that my perspective of these words can be very different from someone else's perspective.
Hmm.
And so, I challenge all our listeners out there to really think about, what does calm mean to you? What does attentive mean to you? What does resilience mean to you? And what does engage mean to you? I wrote down 7 words under each of them. So calm, I thought patience, or being patient, relaxed, being at peace with yourself, being in sync with somebody else, harmonious, serene, unruffled, and trusting. But there's other definitions of
Sure.
calm. So how does calm show up for you, Dean?
Well, definitely patient. And sometimes you think calm is showing up a little bit of being in a relaxed or being at peace. But I think having a sense of calm for me would be one of patience. I think that would be one that would then lead to the other pieces of being relaxed and at peace. And then I think moving down to your 7th one, trusting. But yeah, those really capture it for me. I think just being balanced is maybe another one that would probably keeping that balance there would be a good one for myself.
Yeah, I think balance is a really good one. And it's, it's important to distinguish calm at work versus calm in a meditative state.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or calm as you're out walking or doing something. So, when we think about calm in this caring model, I want you to think about, well, how does calm show up at work? And when the opposite of that doesn't happen, which I call chaotic, how do you get back to calm?
Yeah. When I think of when you frame it like that, I think of when things are flowing along smoothly and nicely, constantly. That's calm, So it's the
Right.
flow,
Flow.
steady flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Marty Seligman, the psychologist that, introduced flow to the
Mm-hmm.
world. And it's, I remember when I was swimming, like, even if I was anxious before I got into practice, when I got in there, I was able to calm myself down.
Yeah.
And just by going through the motions of swimming and staring at a black line. So, there's lots of ways that every one of us has the ability to calm ourselves down. But I think when the rug's been pulled out from under us and we haven't had that sacred place to be, that we can practice it, we have to remind ourselves what it means to us and how we can bring it back into our lives, which is the second part of this PowerPoint.
Yeah, and I think as you're talking and I'm having a chance to gather myself here, it's a lot about control, the ability to have some control, and I think that's probably the hardest part that we're dealing right now, or at least when we go through waves of different processes that come our way, is you just feel that you're somewhat helpless, but just because you don't have a control, there's no way of knowing it. So it's about, when you're not in control, you're obviously not calm. When you feel that you are in some semblance of control, then you have a calmness.
Great connection there. So the second word is attentive, and it's focused, conscientious, present, vigilant, centered, enthralled, immersed. It's when you are deeply engaged in something.
Yeah, I really find being present is pretty important when you start saying attentive. I can think of having a discussion with a colleague or anyone. I think that's the key thing, is trying to have that attentiveness and that sense of presence when we go through that. And I think if you feel it, then you'll convey it. And when you convey it, then it has some lifting points to it.
I agree. And I think one of the negatives of Zoom is that why someone is either participating in a Zoom call or someone is just listening to a Zoom call, this is in the way. And when this is in the way and you're playing on it, then you're not focused. And, I relate to high performance and how important it is in that moment of performance that you're attentive and that you're engaged in that whatever the activity is, whether it's in training or, in actual competition. And when I was thinking about this when, say, for example, every night Jim and I go out for a walk. We try and walk 2 miles after dinner. And we both are not taking our phones with us.
Yeah. Isn't that something? It's a huge effort to have that type of habit, isn't it? Yeah.
And it is hard, but you notice things.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
become focused on the walk instead of focused on something that really isn't going to matter in that half an hour.
Yeah. And yeah, focus in on the conversation.
Yeah.
One of the things I see this attentive and looking at the words you have, another one, as you're describing things, is around not being distracted, as you say about the phone. And when I think about stories, of the people who, are at the Olympics or at the starting line, everybody's earned their way to get there. They're physically prepared, all those things. It's really the ones who can deal with the distractions or not have any distractions are the ones that usually come out well. And that's a whole process of learning over the years.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen.
No.
And it comes in waves. And as we'll talk on the next slide after this one, there are times for inattentiveness too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a time for letting your mind wander, but in high performance, and when you take care of the things you need to do to get to your goals, you need to be attentive.
Yeah.
So the next one is resilience. And I looked at that, and the words grit, courage, determination, perseverance, backbone, tenacity, and fortitude. But I really want to go into the word courage. Because it takes courage to be an athlete. I was having a conversation with Jason Dorland, who runs a great company out in Vancouver, Victoria, BC. He was an Olympic rower, and we were chatting this week about courage and how there's no guarantees in sport.
Mm-hmm.
So when you stand up on that starting block, there isn't a guarantee that you're going to make a team, but you need to have the courage to put yourself in the game. And that's really what, to me, resilience in sports means, is that you're willing to put yourself out on a limb to risk failure to get what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that when I see that word resilience, and I hear, I always look for the stories that have that element of resilience, and I look for that inside the story, because I really find that that's where a lot of our learning can be, and courage. That's what, it's an excitement in a sense when you start to hear the stories of people who have had to exhibit that courage, whether it's to compete or whether it's to just to battle something that they've never had to battle before, something huge.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's something that as an athlete, you take with you. My husband the other night said to me, we were talking about the book and my interview with Ron McLean, and he said, you just jump into everything. And I kind of laughed and said, well, that's just how I've run my life since I was 13. Yeah. I just said, okay, I'm going to try this. And, that is that. And then realize that once you make that commitment, which is engaged, that, you don't give up on it. My word is my bond. And so, moving over to engaged, to me, it's a promise of an undertaking. It's a duty. It's a vow. It's my word. It's the pledge I make to myself.
Yeah. And somewhat not afraid to color outside the lines, I think, because that's I think your creativity and your I'll call it tenacity that you have from all the things that you stand for. I think that's a great example of that.
Yeah, thanks. So let's just jump into the next one. So what I did is develop a slide for each of these words and thought about what's the opposite. And in some cases, put a picture in that created the opposite, and sometimes it created the first word. So this one, I got a kick out of this picture, because it's all these different directions, and our athletes are at home and they're trying to figure out, well, how can I do this and this and this and this, and multitask and be able to meet the expectations. And our coaches are, how can I plan, and how can we ensure the club keeps going? So there is chaos right now. We cannot ignore the chaos. But in the care model, you need to think about when it's appropriate for you to be calm. And so I went back to the switching questions we talked about last week, and I thought, what questions would bring calmness to me when I'm feeling chaotic? Of course, the first one was, what choice do I have? The second one is, this really what I want to feel? And then I went to my natural behavior. Is this the effect? What is the effect I'm having on others? What is this costing me? And how can I ask for help? So I think it's important. These are my questions that I took out of those list of questions. I would challenge our listeners to go and think about what are their questions. Because when you're not looking for answers, you're diving into questions, you're going to ponder things instead of try and find a quick solution.
Well, asking questions, I think, is a critical manner of trying to either manage yourself or to help others manage themselves, right? And asking the questions. And I think what it does also is it actually takes a moment to pause, and then start the start over, or the restart, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So is there any of these questions that, when you looked at them, that would bring you back to calm?
Well, I think it's what choice do I have? I think that's where, that's a good starting point. And it's funny how you put that as your number one, or at least front and center for me. But that would be one. That's the one. What choices do I have? And that's because then that will help lead to some of the, sort of the resolutions you're looking for.
Right. Another one I thought about that I didn't add here is it okay to be chaotic right now? So, there are times when you just have to say, yeah, it's okay. I can feel chaos. I'm strong enough to feel chaos and keep going.
Yeah. And part of that is part of the motivator part, or the piece that actually lifts everybody. You don't want to do it all the time, because it's pretty demanding. But sometimes that's what it takes. It takes a little bit of that extra chaos to actually get the best of you, or leaving things to the last minute. But sometimes we get our best out of ourselves. Sometimes when you have deadlines and things like that, and sometimes procrastination can be a good ally once in a while.
Yeah, that's that pushing that boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
When you have to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So the next one is attentive versus inattentive. And so, my first question that I looked at in that list is, what is surprising about this? Why am I not focused? What is this costing me? And in some cases, it's not costing me anything, and it's okay to be inattentive. It's actually good for me to step back and stop worrying about the things I need to get done and just be. It's being present. It's being in that calm state. And then how else can I think about this? I love this one. What are the challenges I need to prepare for and think about? So
I love exactly that. That's what struck me. That one right there. Yeah.
Yeah, because in goal setting, when you know what your obstacles are going to be, then when they show up, you're not surprised.
That's right.
So if you think about your focus, and you think about all the things that are happening in the chaotic life, what are those challenges you need to be prepared for, and what can you do about them? How can you create momentum despite them?
Yeah. No, I really like that. And I like the last one there that you have there. How can I work at maintaining momentum? I mean, that's the other thing, is that when you do get rolling along, how can I keep it going? And that's a good question to ask.
Yeah, yeah. And then um, resilience versus abdicating that responsibility, that word. So to me, again, this was about honoring the commitment and sticking with it, even though it might be hard.
Hmm.
It might be different for somebody else. But, noticing when I say I'm going to do something and it doesn't get done, how do I cope with that? Do I get back in touch with the person and say, I'm sorry, it'll get done tomorrow?
Hmm.
Or do I just ignore it? So I think being honest and objective. And, another coaching tip I gave a couple of weeks ago was reducing what I commit to. Like really focused, again, going back to focus, really focusing on what I know I need to get done on my list today.
Yeah, my brother always told me, or he always tried to influence me on to do fewer things better.
Right. I love
And
that.
yeah, and sort of that. Sometimes do more with less and things like that. But yeah, it's just sometimes a reminder to help keep things in the right perspective.
Yeah, when we give up on something, um, think about what happens when we give up on something.
Hmm.
And it usually is because we don't think we're going to be able to achieve it.
Yeah,
But the fewer things that you have on your plate, the more focus you can have on achieving them, the less likely you're to abdicate what you said you were going to do.
exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
it allows you to keep both hands on the steering wheel and applying that foot on the gas a bit. Whereas if it's too much, then you can feel again out of control, not in control. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and then the last one is engaged. And I put transgressed. I changed this a couple of times. But you're engaged in things and then sometimes you let them slip.
Hmm.
And, sometimes it's good to let them slip. I'm not saying you always have to be engaged or you always have to be happy and positive. There are appropriate times to be sad and neutral or disappointed in yourself. And so the questions I put down was, what is the big picture that I want to create? And then, is this choice that I'm making working? And what am I committed to right now? With the solutions I have, what new issues should I look for? And how can I bring positive energy to the situation?
I like the last one there because I think that's always the thing, how to keep that positive energy going, because it's sometimes it's about ourselves, but then it's about others around you,
Yeah,
and how to help.
yeah, yeah. So that pretty much summarizes this model.
Hmm.
Um, I think that it's important that we distinguish our work life or our training life from the other part of our life.
Hmm.
Not because they're separate, but because when you have very intense goals, you need to back up those goals with these things.
Yeah, yeah. When I was going through this before we started, what came to mind was a quote that Tom Dolan, great 400 IMer, tough guy who had his challenges, from your alma mater, uh, Michigan University, and it's really around adversity is confidence in disguise.
Yeah.
And I think it's like when you take this whole uh, process you just described today and what we're dealing with. is sort of that sometimes it's one way of framing it or putting it in some sort of perspective and not dwelling. It's actually, this is good. Believe it or not, it is good for us.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'll make us better. And, when we get to the Olympics next year, we're going to be tougher because we've
Yeah,
overcome these things. And we
yeah,
know how to calm ourselves down. We know how to stay focused. We know how to be resilient and gritty and, let go of that fear and take risks. And we know how to be engaged. We've done the
yeah,
work, right?
yeah. Yeah, I think the big thing is taking care of ourselves right now
Yeah.
is very, very important. To have the patience, to have the belief in ourselves, and the belief in the people around you that have the belief in you, and time will come.
Yeah.
It will come. It will roll out. I think the biggest thing is just to understand that we're constantly assessing, we're constantly uh, adapting and adjusting. I mean, those are great traits to really get a handle on, because you can tell us when you went into the Olympic village, things weren't maybe the same as it was in the Olympic pre-camp, and lots of different distractions and different things going on. But it's how you can adapt and make the best of it, and out of any circumstance.
Yep. I'm with you. So
Yeah,
good. Okay. So everybody have a good week. Take care of yourself. And
exactly.
we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Uh, well, as always, Melinda, very thankful for what you're giving to us and sharing with us, and what you're sharing with in the CSCTA. You really are giving back and contributing and making a difference for us in the swimming world of things. Thank you very
Um,
much.
Very proud to be involved with it. And it's I wouldn't be where I am today without swimming. So I get the give back piece because those are the footings of my life.
Yeah,
So very honored to be involved.
that's great. Thank you.